Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Snowpiercer. A great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously we're picking up 6 months after the season 2 finale, and obviously we bounce back and forth between, what's going on with Wilfred and what's going on with Team Andre. Interestingly enough, and I'm surprised we haven't really gotten into it, but all those people who supported Wilfred must be kicking themselves because it's cool. There's no first, second, or third or tailies anymore. It's like, no. It's just the working class. So everyone else is kind of slumming it except for like Wilfred and like his most important people. So like all those people who supported him, they're probably still thinking like, right, it was worth it in the end because under Andre's leadership and the rest of how things were before, we would have never survived. At least Wilfred, he might be ruling with an iron fist, a very barbaric iron fist, but at least he's keeping us alive, so... But I would have loved to really seen it, like, rub it in the noses of all the people who were just like, yeah, this is what we want. They chose this, lit up their candles, and it's like, yeah, we all want Wilfred. And it's like, nope. You know, you don't get the luxuries that you thought you would have before. To be fair, Andre and them did kind of screw you over, so maybe the justification is, well, the moment Wilfred gets the train back, once he gets his internal engine back, and when he gets Snowpiercer back, it's going to be okay. Like, everything will go back to the way it originally was, not the way things were before Wilfred came back, but before, when Melanie was still running the train like it was still Wilfred here, so... We'll see. We didn't really get into the ins and outs of that, but we do see that Ruth is, filling in for Leighton, and she's filling the role of a revolutionary, and she's got Pike as her or her second in command, obviously doing all that they can to, stay hidden away. I was about to say it is interesting, like, hiding away on a train, but I mean, to be fair, it's like, well, what did the Tellies do all that time? They were in the back of the train plotting and planning their revolution underneath everyone else's noses because, well, they're just in the back. No one cares about them, but still, it's just interesting that Ruth's able to kind of get away with this. Sadly, they kind of get sold out eventually later on because Oz and LJ... interestingly enough, the person they got to snitch on, like, the Watermaster or whatever, was the actor who plays Donnie from, I was so excited by that. I was like, Donnie! That's amazing. Because LJ and Oz are still putting themselves in that position where it's like, cool, we're going to be the ones who, that was always the thing, like, LJ had that set up even last season, like, cool, we're going to get close to Wilfred, like, I'm always going to be kind of special in his eyes, and I want to continue that, because that's why they're working where they are, like, they don't have the slummiest job like everyone else does, so I think that's kind of proof of that, but maybe it could still be better. Now, giving that information, pointing Kevin in the right direction, at least puts him in a more favorable position. Obviously, we find out Javi's still alive. Still pretty messed up, though. I don't know whether it's just the trauma, both physically and mentally, of what he went through, but he's very, quiet the entire episode. He only talks, when Wilfred's like, oh, did you apply your cream? He's like, no, sir. He's like, oh, don't worry about it. I'll apply it for you. And it's just like, these will heal up very nicely. And Javi's not really talking other than that, Zara's, popping in to be like, oh, hey, are you okay? Hey, bye, Javi, and all that. Obviously, she's trying to, play the role of, yeah, because she's kind of, she wants to stay on Wilfred's best, good side because, right, you being pregnant's the only thing that's really keeping you alive. But then, because even later on, he kind of jokes about, yeah, I mean, your survival. She's like, no, it's guaranteed, right? And it's like, no, nothing's guaranteed when you're dealing with a sociopath like Wilfred. Because there's obviously a difference of opinion about, how things should work. Obviously, Kevin starts noticing some discrepancies, somebody's, taking some stuff a little bit here and there all over the place so that you don't really notice it, but they noticed it. So, eventually, they were able to track it down to where Ruth and them were hiding. Obviously, Wilfred has no idea who's behind it because when he finds the spot she was at, he's like, oh, you clever person. Who are you? It makes sense. I think that's, once again, the irony behind it, considering, Ruth was Wilfred's #1 fan. And now she's kind of like the biggest thorn in your side doing her own thing. Because she's the one still keeping faith alive that Andre and them were going to make their way back. Pike was like, I don't believe that. Like, Andre left, he's not going to come back. And she's like, if you really believe that, you wouldn't basically be serving as my second in command in this revolution. Because this resistance. Because you still believe you want to hold on to hope. Because it's like, right, holding on to hope is better than giving into the despair that is waiting for them. Just accepting that this is their reality. I mean, it's not like they're that far behind Snowpiercer. They're only behind the engine by, like, what, a month? Because, you know, and Wilford seems crazy. He's like, oh, I told you, oh, we're almost nipping at its heel. Oh, look at these ice tracks. Basically, like, oh, look at the signs that Snowpiercer came through here about a month ago. Like, because they're about, like, I think Ruth was like, the last time we heard and got confirmation that Andre and them were alive was like about 32 days ago. So that's roughly estimating like how far behind they are. It's still kind of nipping at the heel a little at a time, especially considering like they keep stopping just to keep registering like, right, well, places are actually getting warmer. Like, are they getting close to finding said New Eden? Following the ghost of what is Melanie, like what she believed to be true. And obviously they're like nipping at each other's like heels at this moment in time just because it's like obviously trying to make sure that like the engine doesn't completely explode, so they're trying to vent every once in a while, and they're, you know, it's like they're after 6 months of it, it's just like that hope is dimming a little more and more and more as time goes on. So as Wilford's obsession grows and he's just like, oh, I'm getting so closer and closer, they're on the other end kind of giving up hope a little. So it is an interesting parallel between the two. Kevin did suggest a culling, which is like, you know, which Ari was like, no, don't do that. He's like, no. It's like, right, we're going to keep as many people alive because that's the only way to make sure Audrey stays alive. And then he was like, and that's what makes sure that you stay alive as well. And that's what led to the whole conversation of Zara being like, wait, I'm not a guaranteed life in this. Like, there's still a chance I could get got. But it's like, yeah, because initially it was going to be like, oh, even if we freeze off an arm or two and kill some people, like, you know, it's like we got to keep as many people alive as possible, trying not to do too much. But definitely his hand will be forced eventually, I'm sure. Just kind of looking for an excuse for that, his hand to be forced. But once again, we've gotten little peeks here and there, just like how Wilford's living it up compared to everyone else on the train. Once again, there's like no like, oh, high class and stuff like that. I do love that when they're going through what is essentially first class, like no one's going to look for Ruth there because, right, it's an unlivable part of the train. And I love when they're going through Ruth. It's like, did Kevin literally not put anything away? It's still that, side of hospitality still kind of ingrained in her. I mean, I guess it's been a part of her for so long that she can't turn that off even under the circumstances. So I thought that was kind of funny. Right. Obviously, we get a better look at where things currently stand on the Snowpiercer side of things. Like I brought up earlier, they're kind of losing a little bit of hope as Ben's out there searching the ice, trying to find out, you know, clarity for a lot of the stuff that Melanie had found. Once again, trying to verify it and try and hold on to that glimmer of hope of like, yeah, things are actually getting better, that things are warming up in, you know, in particular. But I love that we get insight to Audrey's situation, locked away. Bess having to, well, it's Martin that's kind of she's the jailer, but then like she watches over like Martin, who's also like Sykes is kind of helping too, but she's more so like, right, I'm a prisoner of war and I'm accepting my circumstances, so I'm gonna do all I can to do what I'm supposed to do in this situation, because Audrey's kind of looking at her as a traitor, because it's like, right, once we go back to Wilford and he finds out that you just so willingly gave in to all of this, you know. But Martin, which I love later on when he lets Audrey out, it's like, right, hey, all right, you're going to tell them that you forced me to let you. It's like, how did she do that when she was locked up, Martin? That doesn't make much sense, Martin. How could she have done that? Sadly, while Ben was out there collecting samples, though, he ends up falling and getting hurt, and it's up to Andre and Josie to go get him. Granted, Andre was like, no, I'm gonna go. Like, if something happens, we don't need all three of us out there, especially because we need someone who's going to be able to work on the train from the outside. So she's like, cool, like, then we'll just have to make sure all of us come back. And I love that he's like, right, like, can't you just follow the chain of command? Because obviously it's a complicated thing of, like, she talks about this isn't how any of them wanted this to be. Because obviously it's like, oh yeah, you're like our savior. And he was like, I never used that word. Like at the end of the day, Andre was just a dude trying to stumble his way through all this. He never decided to be a leader. It was a position that was kind of thrown on him, and he had no choice but to kind of accept for the greater good of everything and everyone. So bearing that responsibility, he's just trying to do the best he can, and he rather, once again, believe in what Melanie left behind rather than just kind of giving up. Because, like, what alternative is there just to bow down and submit to the tyranny that is Wilfred? And I love that, like, they had that moment where, like, they ended up kissing, and they're just awkward around each other, not knowing what to say. It's just kind of like, oh, yeah, yeah, just like that, like, pauses in between, and luckily they were able to get to Ben. It was interesting when he kind of talked about, like, right, the whole surfing thing, which I love. Andre's like, oh yeah, like I'll get my surfboard and stuff like that. He's like, oh, we're still surfing. He's like, no, we decided to go skiing instead. But he talks about, Ben talks about an experience he had actually surfing. There was like a particular wave that he rode. He actually went back like sometime later, but by then the sea levels had risen to a point where that wave disappeared. So just everything that this world has kind of gone through, like even these moments and things that had significance, obviously, I mean, I think it kind of flows with just how quickly things can be there, how amazing an experience can be, and how quickly it can disappear with just everything in this world. And obviously Andre gave him most of the charge from his suit, making it seem like, nah, everything's good, like I've got plenty of power, so Josie, go ahead and take him back. And he follows this light, like he sees that there's something else down there, and ultimately ends up getting attacked. Borderline almost like dies because his suit's completely out of power, but luckily he plugs in time. But not before, like I guess in that space of almost like, I guess, unconsciousness between life and death in that moment, he had a vision of New Eden. And it's like, I didn't know that's how that was going to spark. Like, you had a vision of like, wait, what? Like, it's like, oh, is that just like, and you can't really probably bring that up to anyone because you're going to be like, you were practically about to die, so you saw something like that isn't real, like that's all there is to it. But that's probably going to be all the motivation he needs, that maybe it was like, hey, it's a sign from the universe, you're on the right track, this is what you're looking for, it is out there, believe what Melanie says. So I think some angle of that's going to go forward. It's just interesting to know, like, well, their new guest, which I didn't recognize it was her in the trailer. I'm always blinking on her last name, but I always remember her first name because I think it's such an interesting first name. Is the actress's name is Archie. Most recently there was the sci-fi thing, because it was like a one thing, but then I think they brought it back for a second season. I think that's the most recent thing. Obviously before that it was, well, I've seen her pop up in other stuff, but the other thing I associate her with, I'm blanking on her character's name because it's been a while, but Blind Spot is what I probably like first comes to mind when I think of her. I didn't recognize that was her in the trailer. At least I might have recognized. Maybe I've forgotten because it's been a while since I saw the trailer. So I don't remember if like I did recognize it was her at the time, but maybe completely forgot. So when I saw her name in the opening credits, I was like, oh, right, you're in this. That's pretty dope. But yeah, like I said, I just think it's interesting that this was all sparked by, granted, it was all a pipe dream created by Melanie to an extent anyway. Not really a pipe dream, it's what she had noticed, and they're just trying to find out if there's any trend to it, like any specific spots, if there's just any way to kind of like chart out the acceleration, or just if it's even happening at all, like how slow the process might be of things potentially warming up, and in what directions, and kind of give them better understanding of everything. But all the while, Andre was kind of off on his own, and Josie was bringing Ben back, Audrey had to, like, and that's the problem. She always has this air of, like, man, I'm so in control. It's like, it's just, and I brought this up during the trailer. It's still, when I talked about the trailer, it's still so disheartening to know that she is where she is. Like, now it's like right where she started off at the beginning. To be fair, this is who she was before getting away from Wilford. Now she's just kind of back to who she was, I guess, beforehand, or who he forged her into. It's heartbreaking to know that. But to see her being so manipulative of Alex, being like, cool, like, oh, let's go find your father. Like, oh, your mom, like, she's dead. Like, don't keep what she's got alive. Like, the only salvation will be Wilfred. To the point even she started listening, because she's got that, because she knows exactly what buttons to push. Because even Bess tried to get to her being like, hey, like, what would Melanie do? And it's like, well, if it was Melanie, she'd most likely already have all the answers. Okay, what would Ben do? He'd get a pen and paper and start mansplaining everything. So it's like, right, fine, start with that. But, because she knows, like, right, especially when it, like, she doesn't know what to do. And Alex feels, a little lost, and all you have to do is have, like, because she's very flip-floppy in this, like, she's just kind of like, man, is there really any point to this? Like, is there any truth to, like, Melanie's points and everything? So all Audrey had to do was just poke holes in things that were already kind of there. Like, she was already, like I said, a little flip-floppy. And I love that Bess came in, knocking Martin out with the wrench, then knocking, and Audrey was like, whoa, don't hit me. And then eventually she does when, like, Audrey was going to, like, rev up Snowpiercer. It's like, right, let's get back to your dad. He's going to have all the answers. But then even she's like, right, but what if he doesn't? It's like, he doesn't. Believe in your mom. Believe in Melanie. That, and we have to go back for the others. So I should also point this out. Totally didn't realize who she was the entire entirety of season 2. The actress who plays Alex, I believe her name's Rowan Blanchard, if I'm not mistaken. I did not realize she was the actress who played Riley, Corey and Topanga's daughter in Boy Meets World. Totally didn't recognize her. I forgot. I was looking something up, and then I think it related to the show a while back. It was like a couple months ago, and I just stumbled across that information. I thought that was the most interesting thing ever. I didn't watch a lot of Girl Meets World. I caught bits and pieces here and there because, well, for one, I'm a big Boy Meets World fan, but also because one of my nieces was watching it pretty, like, often when it was on air. So, but yeah, I used to watch Boy Meets World, like, when I was in middle school and high school, around that time, when it was syndicated on ABC Family. So, I was already mildly curious anyway, so from what I watched of it, I really enjoyed, but it was just like, I just didn't correlate that in my head. She's a couple years older, plus she has shorter hair now, so that's I think that also kind of threw me for a loop. But when I'm looking at her, I'm like, oh, of course that's you. How did I not recognize that? But nevertheless, I'm going on a whole tangent. I've been sitting on that for a couple months, waiting for the show to come back for me to kind of start talking about that. I mean, I could have brought it up at any point in time, but this seems to be the perfect place to bring that up. That I just totally didn't recognize her last season at all. That's who that was. But so, lucky for them, Snowpiercer makes its way back to pick up Josie and Ben, but then luckily Andre rolls through, and he's not alone. So, obviously, next episode, we're going to get, obviously, a few questions are going to get asked. Like, for one, why'd you attack me? Potentially one of the only other people surviving in the world. You survived, and why'd you attack me? I'm assuming because she's probably under the impression, like, where she was getting away from is where Andre was from, and she's, like, probably thought, like, oh, you're coming to get me, but your suits look different. So, why would she correlate that necessarily? I don't know, I guess she didn't want to take the chances of, like, right, it's kind of a dog-eat-dog world out there, so if you are another survivor, I can't take the chance. Well, not unless there's some, like, other warring community they're with that New Eden's at war with that she thought he was from as well. I don't know. Get answers to that on that front, but definitely going to be interesting to see when we pick up on Snowpiercer what's going to happen about the whole, well, Audrey and Martin thing, because you can't trust Tim anymore. Well, Sykes did, get arrested, so, well, got put in the jail cell is what I mean, so you're going to be a little bit more trusting of her, I guess, but maybe that's going to be the whole point in the end. Who knows? But back on Snowpiercer, the people that were taking advantage of the bath and stuff like that, their punishment, it's better than getting a frozen arm. I guess not better, because they're basically going to get dumped in a whole bunch of crap, and they're not allowed to bathe. Which I'm like, I was like, that's not as bad. It's like, well, it's bad because, well, you're going to have to smell that the entire time, and it's going to sit on you, and it's going to cake, and it's going to crust. But also, it's like, right, because some of that's landing in people's, like, open orifice, like their mouths and stuff like that. So I'm like, yeah, that's going to give you some E. coli, so you could potentially get sick from it. So it's not like, oh, it still mess you up pretty badly, so. But I guess in his own twisted way, it's Wilfred's way of equal punishment. So I'm surprised it wasn't harsher, but that's still pretty rough too, because basically everyone has to come by, give them a bucket. Even Pike had to do it. And even the person that was bathing, she was like, no, it was all worth it in the end to do that. So it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.